Reading 74 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teachings of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 1. Birdlip, May 1st, 1943. Internal Considering and External Considering. 9. On Being Passive. 3. In the last paper, it was said that a man's work on himself starts from the moment he begins to feel two men in himself. One is passive, and the most it can do is to register and observe what is happening to it at the hands of the other. The other, which calls itself I, is active. It speaks of itself in the first person. It regards itself as being the real man, the man himself. Let us notice that it is said that a man's work starts from the moment he begins to feel two men in himself, one passive and the other active. Now, how many do you suppose reach this stage? Let me ask each of you this question. Have you reached this stage distinctly, so that you constantly realize that there is an active side in you that will keep on taking charge of you at every moment, and a passive side that can only look on and be conscious that this is so, and is quite helpless in the face of this active side? If you can answer with certainty that you have reached this stage, then it is a matter for congratulation, because it means that a real and very important inner division has taken place in you, necessary for all further stages of the work. For it is exactly this passive side that has become separated from the active side that can grow. The evolution of a man in the work sense is an evolution from the passive and not the active side of himself. But it is just because this inner division into an active and a passive side is so difficult to attain and takes so long a time and is attended by so many initial failures that personal work halts or moves in a circle. As this is such an important matter and so difficult to grasp, let me put the question in another way. Do you realize your mechanicalness? And do you continually realize it? What does it mean to realize one's mechanicalness? It means that you begin to realize that you are a machine that reacts to external influences. It does not act, but reacts. All that you have taken as individual and conscious action is mechanical. In other words, to realize what mechanicalness is to realize that you cannot behave differently from the way you do behave. Now, everyone thinks he is free and can act as he likes or chooses. Everyone thinks that he or she can say either this or that by choice, or do either this or that by choice. The work teaches that this is an illusion. It says that it is the first great illusion that must be dispelled in practical work on oneself. Man cannot do. In order to do, a man must be free to do. In order to do, a man must first be. And to be a man must become a unity. Then he is free. But man as he is not free, although he so fondly imagines that he is. Whatever he does is dictated to him by his machine, that is, by the kind of machine that has been built up in him by circumstances, education, imitation, fantasy, negative states, attitudes, opinions, and so on. This is one of the fundamental principles in the psychological teaching of this work. A man cannot do. It does in him. That is, the machine does. This is what is meant by the saying that a man must reach the stage, through long and often painful inner observation, of realizing that there are two men in him, one active and the other passive. The active man does everything by reacting to impressions. The passive man once he has come into conscious existence, can do nothing at first. He can only notice what the active man does, and for a long time he must submit to it, however much he, the passive man, would like things to be different. Becoming passive to oneself is the first stage of the work. It requires great inner activity of attention. The question of control of personality arises later, not here. Before any question of control arises, a man must study what it means to become passive to himself, what it means not to identify with himself at every moment. Otherwise, he will all the time be identified with himself. This includes the whole of himself, everything he can observe in process of time, not merely what he, personality, thinks is bad, but everything. That is why it is so often said that self-observation must be uncritical. If it is critical, then you will only observe one part and never think of observing another part, which may actually be connected. The passive man has not yet the strength to change anything in the active man, that is, to control him. Unfortunately, people start off right from the beginning trying to control, trying to do. This is impossible unless the right point of control is established. The right point of control comes from the gradual strengthening of the passive man. It is often said in the work that a man is in prison. The original talks were often about prison and about escape from prison. But to escape, a man must first realize he is in prison and see where his prison lies. I will quote something once said on this point. If a man in prison is at any time to have a chance of escape, then he must first of all realize that he is in prison. If he imagines he is free, then how can he even begin to think about escaping from prison? He will regard the idea as nonsense. So long as he fails to realize he is in prison, so long will he think he is free. Then he has no chance whatsoever. No one can help him. No one can liberate him by force, against his will, in opposition to his wishes. If liberation is possible, it is the first requisite that a man feels he is in prison and begins to study the prison he is in and the means of escape. And he can only gain freedom as the result of long work and effort. And by this is meant conscious effort, directed towards a definite aim. But in order to escape from prison, a man must have help. He must be told what to do, and told again and again by those who have escaped, and who in turn have transmitted their knowledge to others who have realized they are in prison and have themselves begun to escape. In what is said in the above quotation, you must understand that no physical prison is meant, nor does it mean merely that the body is the prison. What is meant is a psychological prison that must be escaped from. Everyone is in the prison of himself. If a man could really stand behind himself, that is, stand behind every side and every manifestation of himself, whether he thinks it good or bad, then he would be able to see the prison he lives in. But in order to do this, he must become passive to himself. He must see all his reactions, whether he regards them as good or bad, passively. He must see all the opinions he expresses, whether he regards them as good or bad, passively. He must see his attitudes. And when he has reached this stage by long self-observation, then he is really divided into two men, one active and the other passive. The passive man stands inside or behind the active man. The passive man at this stage is powerless. But although he is powerless in face of the active man, he is now conscious of him. He sees his prison This is the starting point of real change. So I ask you again the question asked before. Have you reached the stage of realizing that there is an active side in you that takes charge of you at every moment, and a passive side that can only look on and is quite helpless in the face of this active side? The less you identify with yourself, the more will you become passive to yourself.